Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Covering both sides of the big issues with the analysis you trust on News Radio 1040 WHO.
4-day weeks are becoming more and more of a thing. And Dr. Shelley Yellen is on my Newsmaker line. And you're very welcome. How are you, ma'am?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
You are a workplace and leadership expert. We'll get into that a little bit later on. I mean, 4-day week's very attractive. People can do the same hours in 4 days that they can do in 5, but then they get a 3-day weekend. Yes.
Yes, actually, and it's been very interesting to see the research coming out that's showing not only are people happier having that extra day, but shockingly, some of the companies that were involved in a massive study were seeing a 15% increase in revenue. So it's not only good for people, it's good for business, it appears.
No, I can see why that would be a thing. I really can, because if you have happy people, they're more productive people, right?
Exactly. And then the other is just the principle of we fill up the time that we have. And so it's interesting to think about how a 4-day work week actually causes us to become more efficient. And so that there's less time maybe spent in meetings that aren't productive. There's not as much time spent in the drama of complaining and criticizing that can happen during the day. And so it causes us really to maybe minimize distractions a little bit better, focus a little clearer, and get our work done.
Okay, so I totally get it. I really do. Once upon a time, I had a whole bunch of companies. I stopped having a job when I was like 22, maybe 23, and opened my first company. And until I got this job, I didn't work for anyone else but myself for a very, very long time. And then I got this job. The reason I bring this up is because other people used to work for me. And the people that used to work for me, well, you know, I'm like, hey, if there's nothing to do, go home. I don't need you pushing paper clips around a desk. But equally, if we're coming up on something and a deadline and we may not finish until 9:30 tonight, I expect you to stay. And that's essentially how I operated my business. And I had, as far as I'm aware, very happy people. I don't remember people leaving very often. It was very rare for anyone to leave me.
And you hit something that's super important that we sometimes miss, which is you gave very clear direction and very clear expectation. Like when we're clear on what the deliverable is, when we're clear on what winning looks like, it impacts a lot of things. First of all, it allows us to prioritize as we need to, and it allows that employer to know whether or not people are being productive. And so clarity is super important when it comes to this, because not every workplace and not every role could potentially move to that. But for those who can, it's definitely worth considering.
So these studies are showing, well, you tell me, do we have happier people? Let me ask you a series of short questions. Do we have happier people on 4-day weeks?
Yes. So what they saw was a 65% reduction in the number of sick days that people took. They saw an increase in productivity, an increase, like I said, in revenue. They saw a 57% decline in the likelihood that an employee would leave. And as you could guess, that at the end of the trial study, about 90% of both the employers and the employee wanted to keep it that way. So by having this experience, they really shifted a lot of their beliefs, and that's where the critical change has to happen. It's going to require us to maybe suspend some very old beliefs that we've held onto for a long time.
And they're going to have to, you know, I think it's doable on a number of businesses, but not all businesses. As I said, you know, I I think I would have to be here 5 days a week. But my local supermarket, they could have a series of overlapping people on 4-day weeks, and they open, I think, at 5 o'clock in the morning and close 11 o'clock at night. 7 days a week. Occasional times they close all the doors, like Christmas, etc. But essentially they're open all the time. So they would just have to have overlapping people on 12-hour shifts 4 days a week, right?
Yeah, and, healthcare, this has been a practice for some time. But I think you're right. You have to take a look at what's the deliverable at the end of the day, and does it align with what success looks like in this role.
Very interesting conversation. So if you had to guess, if we gave you the crystal ball right now, and you had to guess how many companies would be doing this 5 years from now, what would your, in percentage terms, what would you think about American companies in percentage terms doing this 5 years from now?
Well, I don't know if I have a percentage, but I'm going to guess we're going to see a significant increase. And the reason is because it's a really unique time in the workplace right now. We have a lot of new opportunities and new uncertainties hitting us all at once. One is, I know it's been a few years, but COVID really required us to reevaluate a lot of our beliefs about work and where people could work and what productivity looked like. Now we have the increase in AI, and we're not sure how that's going to impact a lot of jobs and a lot of automation in jobs. And then we have a new generation entering the workplace, which has a different set of values and a different set of life experiences. So I think it's a really cool time right now to maybe step back, keep an open mind, and reevaluate what does success look like, and could we, in fact, create a work environment that's actually more brain friendly. And so I think we're going to see an increase in it. I don't know exact percentage, because I do know this, because we look at everything through the lens of how the brain works best. And one thing that we know is the brain loves what feels familiar. And the 5-day work week is an old familiar friend to most people. So to reevaluate that belief is going to require some time, and I think it's going to require a lot more research that proves that it's not only maybe doable, but actually healthier.
Yeah, because, I work with people who will use some of their personal time and take what they call a mental health day, because they just want a longer break than they would otherwise have. So I certainly think there are industries where this absolutely could work. But the other problem is, in today's world, we have some younger people who are not all that keen on any kind of work.
It appears so.
Right.
So then that's the other challenge that we're all trying to address. And oftentimes, I'm going to go back to just giving clear expectations. Oftentimes what maybe the old-timers are interpreting as a lack of work ethic or a lack of desire is sometimes a lack of clarity, because we haven't been clear on what the expectations are. We just maybe assume that they see the world the way we see it, and that's simply not true. They've had an entirely different life experience. A lot of them went through COVID, and so all of the changes that happened there, and so I think it's really on employers to be even clearer than ever.
Well, when you said a whole lot of these young people went through COVID, I was waiting for you to say, bless their hearts.
Well, I probably could say that. And they really, in some ways, were shortchanged.
Well, of course they were. No, they absolutely were. And it wasn't even, depending on where you were. If you were in Florida, you had an entirely different experience to if you were in California, for the sake of argument, right? An entirely different experience. So I get that, but I think we're so far removed from it now. I think we need to leave that in the rear view. These people, these young people who were hoping to graduate in 2020, that was 6 years ago. I think we need to move on and stop saying, well, I went through COVID. I didn't get to walk across the stage, Okay.
It's definitely not necessarily an excuse, but it could be an explanation, because we know that our life experiences shape our beliefs. And if we were to take this generation all the way back, even before that, they just had a very different experience as far as the interaction with social media and technology. Parents, I believe, were a little bit blindsided by the way that social media was going to influence a lot of their kids' lives. And when you think about that transition through COVID, there were a lot of expectations in school that were lowered. There were certain...
But the reason, Sherry...
straight into college.
I understand.
Yeah.
Look, the reason I bring this up is because we basically agreed that young people seem to have a problem with wanting to work, which is going to give these companies a problem with moving to a 4-day week, because whilst they can do that for some members of staff, they're going to need other members of staff. Let's go back to my supermarket, for example. They're going to need a lot more people to work, period. They're going to need a lot more employees to pull that off, because they're going to need to cover all those shifts to stay open from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. And if they lose the 5-day week, which I completely agree with, I absolutely think that's in everybody's best interest. But if they lose that and they can't get the people, then they're going to be struggling.
Yes, it really is. It's evaluated based on a case-by-case basis, but it's certainly worth considering, especially when the output or the product that the company produces is ideas and innovative solutions and solving problems, because that's all coming from the 3-pound technology that's between our ears. And working with the brain means that your brain needs time to think and reflect. And sometimes when we're always on, we're really always distracted. And just like a professional athlete, they become experts in recovery, because they know that recovery time is just as important as their performance time. And especially for thought workers, recovery time equally important to the time that I need you to focus.
Sherry Yellen is a workplace and leadership expert. She's the author of The Science of High Performance Leadership, and you can find out more about her at yellengroup.com. Sherry, thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate you. Have a great rest of the day, all right?
Thank you.
All right. God bless you.